Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff from Ayala Tours, and since 1986, we've been connecting people to Israel and the Jewish world. We are the official travel partner for Hadassah trips to Israel. We run trips all over the world through our traveling university program featuring outstanding scholars. We've got, as it happens, we've got trips in Eastern Europe right now. We actually even have trips in Israel with everything going on. But this evening, we're going to be talking about Argentina. As it happens, we have a trip coming up in partnership with the American Conference of Cantors. That's going to be this coming February 2025. The trip is not just for cantors. It is led by cantors and open to all. So if you haven't already signed up for it, you can find all the information about that trip. I'll talk about it a little more later on, but you can find all the information about it on our website, which is ayala.com. All right. This evening is a webinar, not a Zoom meeting, meaning you can see us. We cannot see you. So you can sit back, relax, and enjoy the program. It is a live program, which of course means we hope that you will participate. After the formal presentation, we'll have a Q&A. You can post your questions into the Q&A function, and we will get to as many of them as we possibly can. And now I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction for our speaker this evening, who is coming to us from Buenos Aires, Argentina. Claudia Hercman is an Argentinian tour guide and translator. She is also a sculptor and painter whose main subjects are memory and uprooting in honor of her four grandparents who emigrated from Poland to Argentina in the 1930s. Claudia was born and raised in Buenos Aires into the Argentinian Jewish community. 20 years ago, she became bored of translating books with a computer as her only company, so she decided to study tourism and history. She has been conducting city, art, and Jewish tours ever since and enjoying every single moment of it. Then 2020 arrived, which forced her to go back to spending time with her computer. So she decided to create these virtual lectures as an excuse to be able to talk to people and meet new friends from all over the world. We are very fortunate that you did so. So Claudia, for this evening's presentation on Argentina and Argentina's Jewish history, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so thank everyone. I cannot see you, but I know you are there.
And I'll be here too. I'm going to disappear, but I'm here if you need anything.
Okay. So I'm going to share something with you here. Okay, so this is the title of our presentation, Jewish Life and Culture in Argentina. I'm going to talk about 500 years of history in 45 minutes. So I'm going to, go quickly and let you know about many things that took place here in Argentina with the Jewish community since the beginning, the immigration, until the present day. So I don't know if you know, but the first Jews that came to Latin America came with Columbus. Because the same year Columbus came to America was the year of the expulsion of the Jews from Spain, 1492. So those who didn't want to convert or to die in the hands of the Inquisition decided to come on the risky adventure with Columbus, not knowing where they were going, and they ended up in the Caribbean because Columbus never came to the South. So he made 4 trips, 1492, 93, 1498, and 1502. Then some other sailors, Spanish sailors, started to come to the South. But the first Jewish settlements in America were in the Caribbean. Of course, all those people who came from Spain and Portugal were Sephardic Jews. They came as secret Jews. They didn't tell even their children that they were Jewish, not their neighbors or anyone else. And so we don't know who they were, how many they were. They were not recorded. Many of them went on being Jewish and celebrating high holidays and Shabbat in basements. In 1860, this tree that you see here, this tree is the oldest and biggest tree in Buenos Aires. It's a rubber tree. It's in a very nice area called Recoleta here in Buenos Aires. This tree was planted in 1800. I told you about the Jews that came with Columbus. That was the end of the 15th century, the 16th century. So from that time until 1813, more or less, here in Argentina, the Inquisition was controlling everything. So it was very dangerous to say that you were a Jew. But in 1813, the Inquisition was abolished here in Argentina. And this area that is Recoleta, where this tree is, it was a swampy area. There was nothing here. It was just like the border of the city. And there were only 6 recorded Jews in Argentina. Only 6 recorded. We know that there were many more, but only 6 recorded. One of them in 1860, when this tree was a regular tree, now it's the biggest and oldest in the city, he went to that area and he sat under the tree and he started to pray with his prayer book. He didn't want to be bothered by other people in the city. He was Henry Joseph, who was an Englishman, an English Jew. So he sat there, there was no one around, and he started praying with his prayer book. When he looked up, he saw another man doing the same thing with the same book under the same tree. And I told you there were only 6 recorded Jews in the country. So he approached, they started talking. The other one was Louis Brie, a French Jew. And they made a promise to bring a minyan for the following high holidays. They could do it. In 1861, they took 10 Jewish people to pray together under that tree. And so we consider that tree to be the first synagogue in Buenos Aires. Because for a synagogue, you know, you don't need a building or luxury or seats. You just need the prayer book and a minyan. At that time, of course, only men, now men and women. But at that time, it was there were 10 Jewish men who prayed together for the first time officially in Buenos Aires. So they started, these 2 men started the community, the Jewish community of Argentina officially. That was 1860. 1861, they gathered under the tree. In 1862, they signed everything. They started the community. One of them, Henry Joseph, became the first rabbi, although he didn't know much about religion, and he was married to a non-Jewish woman. That was a scandal at the time, but he was the only one who dared, and so he was accepted. This was 1860. In 1880, this man, Julio Roca, became the president of Argentina. He was a military man. He went to the south of the country. Here is the map of Argentina. This is Patagonia, the south. Patagonia was not part of Argentina at the end of the 19th century. So this man went to the south, started a war against the Chilean that also wanted Patagonia for themselves, and against the natives who lived there. He won the war. He got Patagonia for Argentina, and he realized that he had a lot of new territory to populate. So he said, I'm going to open the borders for the Europeans to come and populate the country. And he said, I quote, I prefer to populate the country with civilized European people rather than the barbarian natives, who, by the way, were the owners of the land. He, out of all the people who could come from Europe to populate the country, he preferred the Jews for a change in history. And this is because he knew that maybe English people, French people, Italian people would come, make money, and go back to their countries. And he knew that there was a group of Russian Jews fleeing from the pogroms in Russia. And he said, these people had nowhere to go back to. So they are going to stay. This is one of the reasons why, although the first immigrants that came, the first Jewish people that came to Latin America were Sephardic, and we were a Spanish colony, most of the Jews that live now, today, in Argentina are Ashkenazi and not Sephardic, because the first Sephardic Jews that came disappeared, assimilated, or died without telling anyone that they were Jewish. while the big waves of immigration started at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, most of them Ashkenazi Jews fleeing from the pogroms. So nowadays, the Jewish community of Argentina is about 200,000 Jews, and it's the 6th largest in the world. So there were two main requirements for all the immigrants to come to Argentina, not only Jewish people. This ship, the Weser, brought 800 Jews altogether in 1889. It was the first official organized wave of immigration of Jewish people to Argentina. But there were two main requirements for all the immigrants to come. The first one was that they had to be big families, because they needed them to populate the rural areas, not only Patagonia, but also the rural areas in the north or in the center of the country. This was very easy for Orthodox Jews because they had a lot of children. But the second requirement was that they had to be farmers, because they needed them for the rural areas. And that was very difficult for Jewish families because they were not allowed to own land in Europe, in Russia, in Ukraine, in Romania. And so they were no farmers. So what did they do? They lied. They said that they were farmers to be accepted. So this is a paragraph. This is from a passengers list. You can see 4 families, the ages, young couples with a lot of children, and those who could work said that they were farmers, although most of them were not. So when they arrived here in Argentina, this is another ship that brought, this is a Spanish ship that brought also Jews to Argentina. When they arrived here, they went to the immigration hotel, similar to Ellis Island, but here in the port of Buenos Aires. They didn't have money. They didn't speak the language, of course, like all the immigrants, you know what I mean. But they didn't have a piece of land because they had bought land before coming here. But when they arrived, they found out that the land had been resold. And so they had no land for all the families, the 800 people who came all together. So they contacted the Jewish community here that was very small, and they could find a piece of land to the north of the province of Buenos Aires. They went there, but it was an abandoned railway station. There was nothing there, and they didn't know how to be farmers. They had no money. They didn't know what to do in the middle of nowhere in Argentina. 60 children died during that time, starved to death. And so there was a man who came here and found this group of Jews starving in the middle of nowhere in Argentina. The first place where they established was called Mosesville, and they studied a colony there in Mosesville. But a researcher came here and saw this group of people starving, and so he contacted a man called Baron Morris the Hirsch. Baron Morris the Hirsch was a philanthropist, a German banker. He had lost his son some years before, and he said that all his fortune would go to the Jewish community wherever it was needed. And so this man, Baron Morris the Hirsch, started buying land for the Jews in Argentina. He founded the Jewish Colonization Association. He founded many colonies, Jewish colonies in Argentina. And he started sending more and more Jews to Argentina. He said that this was the promised land. Here, the Jews could live safely, freely, and they were welcome. And there were land for everyone. And so his idea was to send millions of Jews to Argentina. He couldn't make it because he died before he could make it, but that was his idea. He never came to Argentina, but the combination between this president, Roca, who opened the borders and attracted the Jews to Argentina, and Baron Morris the Hirsch, who bought land for the Jews and sent more Jews to Argentina, is the reason why the Jewish community of Argentina is so large, is the 6th largest in the world, although we are so far away from the Middle East and from Europe. It was planned that way, although they never met, and one of them was a murderer, he killed the natives, and the other one was a philanthropist. So the Jews that started establishing, settling in these colonies, started building synagogues. This is another synagogue in Mosesville. This is a ranch synagogue in the province of Entre Rios. This is a school. All those things, all these buildings were built by the Jewish community, that the people who lived in the colonies. And they started to learn from the gauchos, from our cowboys, let's say, how to become farmers. They strove to become Argentinian citizens. That was another requirement from the government, and also to become farmers. So they became Jewish gauchos. The Jewish gaucho is really a mythical character. The Jews had a lot to thank the gauchos for, and they started dressing like gauchos, behaving like gauchos, and also drinking mate like gauchos. I don't know if you know, I'm going to tell you briefly. Mate is the typical Argentinian infusion. It's a gourd that is dried and carved. We put a herb inside that is called yerba mate, and a straw, and we pour hot water and sip from the straw. This is typical. Most of the Argentinian people drink mate. I remember my grandfather, who was a Jewish gaucho. He came from Poland, and he went to the colonies first before coming to Buenos Aires. And he used to drink mate, but instead of pouring water, he used to pour milk. And he said that it was Jewish mate. I asked him, why is milk more Jewish than water? But he said, it doesn't mind. It's my way of drinking mate. I think it was an attempt to keep his habits and his Jewishness, and together with the Argentinian habits. And that happened a lot with all these immigrants that came to Argentina. If you go now to the colonies, you are not going to find many Jews. Most of the Jews, I would say 85% of the Jews, 80% of the Jews live in cities. Mainly in Buenos Aires, but also in other capital cities in other provinces. And this is because they built schools for their children and synagogues and theaters, but they found out when their children started to grow that there were no universities close to those areas. And so they started to send their children to Buenos Aires to study in the university. They had to become farmers, but they didn't want their children to be farmers. So they started sending their children to the university, and then also their parents started to come to Buenos Aires. So they started migrating from the colonies to Buenos Aires and developing their Jewish lives in the city of Buenos Aires. They started publishing newspapers and magazines like these that I'm showing you. Some were written in Spanish with Jewish issues, some were written in Yiddish or Hebrew. And there was an Italian newspaper, an anarchist Italian newspaper that had one page written in Yiddish because of all the Russian Jewish anarchists who lived here. And the Italians knew that they would be interested in reading about the anarchist people. So there were many newspapers and magazines, but also they started building theaters and performing Jewish, Yiddish, or Spanish plays with Jewish issues in the Once district, that is the typical Jewish district. Then I'm going to show you the Once district, that is really a commercial district. And this is Hevel Katz, that is the man who sang the song that you heard at the beginning. Hevel Katz was a Lithuanian singer and composer and a comedian, and he was said to be the Jewish Gardel. Gardel was our main tango singer, Argentinian tango singer, and they were contemporary, and so people said that he was the Jewish Gardel, and he died very young, but he used to sing, as I told you before, songs half in Spanish, half in Yiddish, and it was very, very funny. We also had a lot of tango composers and tango musicians from the Jewish community, because many of the people, of the Jews who came from Russia, from Ukraine, were musicians. They played the violin or the piano, and they were involved in tango music. This is like a tribute to Hevel Katz, and here you can see the music sheet of Avinu Malkeinu and his accordion and his picture. So the Jews that moved from the colonies to Buenos Aires started working in factories or in different companies. And they started seeing that the conditions, the working conditions were not very good. So they started talking to their co-workers and telling them, why should we put up with all these terrible working conditions with low salaries? We have to do something about it. And so they started strikes in Buenos Aires. Remember these people, this was the beginning of the 20th century, and these people were Russian Jews who had socialist, communist ideas, and in 1917 was the communist revolution in Russia. So they started talking to their co-workers, and most of the leaders of these strikes were Jewish. So this brought up a terrible event that was called the Tragic Week in January 1919. There was a strike in a factory, and then in many other factories. There was a repression against the workers by the police. And within that week, where there were a lot of people killed, there was something that we call now a pogrom in Buenos Aires. It was covered up for a long time as part of the repression against the workers. But some 40 years ago, 30 years ago, the government started to admit that it was focused on the Jews and the Jewish district. The police and the Argentinian Patriotic League, that was a group of Argentinian rich Catholic men who went to the Once district, the Jewish district, smashed the windows of Jewish stores, raped Jewish girls, killed Jewish men. More than 200 Jewish men were killed at that time, because they said that there was a Russian communist Jewish conspiracy against the good Argentinian people. And so we call it a pogrom in Buenos Aires, and it was kind of an antecedent of Kristallnacht long before, because it was more or less the same MO. These are some of the pictures of that tragic week in 1919. But not all the Jews that lived in Argentina were good people or victims, like in this case. There were also criminals. My grandmother used to say that there are no Jewish criminals, but believe me, there are. This happened in the 30s. The Tzvi was a group of pimps, Polish pimps, that worked, if you can say that it is work, here in Buenos Aires and in other capital cities of other provinces, but mainly in Buenos Aires. It was called the Tzvi or the Warsaw, because they were mainly Polish. They were a group of Polish men who used to go to Poland and convince the families there that were having a hard time to send their daughters with them to Buenos Aires, because with promises of a good Jewish husband or a good job for them. And so the families trusted this man, sent their daughters to Buenos Aires with them. And when they arrived here, they would take their passports, enslave them in brothels. And this went on from 1906 to 1937. Fortunately, the Jewish community, the official Jewish community, expelled them from the community. And they didn't allow them, the pimps, They didn't allow them to bury their people in the Jewish cemeteries or to go to the synagogues. But they didn't mind because they had so much money that they built their own cemetery and their own synagogue. This went on for a long time until this woman, Raquel Lieberman, who was one of the women who were enslaved in these brothels, managed to buy her herself from the pimp with the money he made with the tips the clients gave her. She gave all the money to one client who she trusted, and this man bought her from the pimp and she was freed. So with her help, the police could imprison all these organizations. And there is a book that tells the story by Mirta Shalom, an Argentinian Jewish writer. It's called The Polish Woman, Immigrants, Pimps, and Slaves at the Beginning of the 20th Century. It's a very interesting book. So she was really a hero, Raquel Lieberman. So we are in more or less in the 30s now, before the Second World War. This is the first synagogue in Buenos Aires that was built in 1897 by the two men who gathered under the tree that I told you before. But in the 30s, there were a lot of people coming from the colonies and more people coming from Europe because they were having a terrible time there because of anti-Semitism before the Second World War. So the community saw that the building was too small for the growing community. So in 1932, they demolished this building and they built this one in the same location. This is the Libertad Synagogue. It was built in 1932. At the beginning, it was Orthodox, or they didn't say Orthodox, they used to say traditionalist. Now this synagogue is Reform. And so they were doing, when they built this synagogue, you can tell that they were not hiding anymore because it's a high building. It was one of the highest when they built it. And you can see all the symbols of Judaism. You cannot be mistaken for another building. So they were very proud of what they had achieved in the country, and they did not hide anymore. They didn't need to hide anymore. This is inside the synagogue. You can see that it looks more or less like a church, long wooden benches, stained glass. There is even a pipe organ. And I told you before that we don't need this for a synagogue, but they were doing the same thing everyone else was doing in the city. At that time, the beginning of the 20th century, everyone in Buenos Aires was hiring Italian or French architects to build their churches, their private homes, their synagogues. They wanted to be as all the other people from Buenos Aires, that we are called, people from Buenos Aires are called porteños, people from the port. And so they did the same thing. So the synagogue, if you want to see the synagogue, when you come here, you have to go through the Jewish Museum of Buenos Aires. It was the house of a Jew who donated his house for the Jewish Museum of Buenos Aires, and then both buildings were connected. And now you can see both buildings if you go to the Jewish Museum. So this was before the Second World War. During the war, Argentina was neutral until the end of the war, when they saw who were winning. The government saw who were winning, and so they took sides for the Allies very conveniently in 1945. But during the war here, there was a Nazi party that was very large and powerful. The German community here in Argentina was very important. In 1938, there was a rally, a Nazi rally. This is not Germany, this is Argentina, Buenos Aires. You can see here the Argentinian flags. This is in a very important Argentinian venue called Luna Park. There were 15,000 people that day in April 1938 celebrating the annexation of Austria to the Third Reich. So this, as far as I know, was this is the same meeting was the largest Nazi rally during the war outside Europe. Most of the German citizens here supported the Nazi regime. Only one German newspaper and one German school were against the Nazi regime, but all the others supported the Nazi regime ideologically, but also with money. They used to collect money and send money to Germany. This was during the war. After the war, this man became the president of Argentina. This is the 40s and the 50s. He was elected in 1946, and I'm sure you heard a lot of things about Perón. He was Juan Domingo Perón, about Perón and the Jews. Many people say that Perón was a Nazi sympathizer. Other people say that Perón was very good to the Jews. There are different versions. Perón, in my opinion, Perón was neither a Nazi sympathizer nor a friend of the Jews. He was a politician, and he did what it was convenient. And there are many evidence, there are proofs of all these things. For example, when he became the president, he appointed a Nazi sympathizer for the migrations department. This man helped a lot of Nazis come to Argentina. At the same time, after the war, at the beginning, he didn't allow Jews into the country. But when he saw that to be in good terms with the United States, that was the winner of the war, he had to be in good terms with the Jewish community here because they were related, he started allowing Jews into the country. And he also attracted Jews to his party. It's very surprising maybe, but there were at that time a lot of Jews that supported Perón because he introduced a lot of benefits for the working class. And many of the Jews who were here in Argentina were left-wing. Even today, if you ask people, he died in 1974. But the Peronist party, his party, is still very important. And even today, there are a lot of Jews who support his party and don't believe in the other side of Perón, the one who led the Nazis in. For example, in 1948, when the declaration of the independence of the State of Israel, Argentina abstained under his rule. Argentina abstained. But then when Perón saw that Israel was going to become a country anyway, Argentina was the first country in Latin America to send an ambassador to Israel. And another thing they did, for the same reason, the foundation Eva Perón sent a lot of supplies to Israel to help during the wars of independence. And this is a picture of Eva with Golda Meir. Golda Meir came here to Argentina and thanked Eva for the supplies he sent during the war in 1951. So, we know also that a lot of Nazis were allowed in Argentina, and many of them also worked for the Argentinian government. So it's not black and white or white. It was what was convenient. I told you many Nazis came to Argentina. The most notorious of all the Nazis who were caught in Argentina, who were captured here, was Adolf Eichmann. This was during the 60s. He came here in 1950 under a false name with a false passport. This is the passport that is exhibited in the Holocaust Museum in Buenos Aires. The name was Ricardo Clement. So he came under this passport. I am not going to tell you the whole story because I'm sure you read the books about his capture or the films, but he was captured here in Argentina and he was taken to Israel, where he was prosecuted and he was hung in 1962, the only execution in Israel ever. But after his capture, there were many diplomatic problems between Argentina and Israel. Argentina said that Israel had invaded Argentinian territory and kidnapped an Argentinian citizen. Of course, then Israel said he was not an Argentinian citizen because he became Argentinian under a false name. So Ricardo Clement was Argentinian, but not Adolf Eichmann. So nothing came of it then, but there were many anti-Semitic events here in Buenos Aires because the German community and many fascist people who lived here in Argentina, there were many, blamed the Jews for Eichmann's capture. So there were, I told you that now there are 200,000 Jews in Argentina, but in the 60s there were more, there were much more, but there were many emigration waves. Of course, also assimilation, but there were emigration waves. The first emigration wave was during the 60s after Eichmann's capture, because many Jews felt unsafe living here in Argentina. Another emigration wave was during the 70s. In the 70s, we had a dictatorship that was not the only one, maybe the most famous one, but not the only one. We had 6 dictatorships from 1930 to 1983, in 53 years. This was the last one from 1976 to 1983. During that time, 30,000 people disappeared from the country, meaning they were kidnapped, taken to secret centers of captivity where they were tortured and killed. Out of 30,000 people who were kidnapped, 1,900 were Jewish. If you compare the percentage of Jews in the country and the percentage of Jews who disappeared, it is a very high percentage. There are 200,000 Jews in Argentina out of 47 million people, but there were 1,900 people, 1,900 Jews who disappeared out of 30,000. So they were not kidnapped because they were Jewish, but because they were left-wing or activists against the government, but they were worse treated because they were Jewish. And this man, Rab Marshall Mayer, who came here during the 60s to bring the reform conservative movement here to Argentina, he helped a lot of people get away from the country when they were in danger. And he was appointed by the first president of the democracy in 1983 as one of a board of 13 people who had to investigate the crimes of the dictators. He was one of them, honorable people, and they wrote a book called Never Again with all the testimonies and the investigations. And Marshall Mayer was the one who suggested that title for the book because it was the same motto that was used after the Holocaust. So that was the 70s. During the 80s, there was a period of calm for a while because we came back to democracy at that time and people were very happy. But in the 90s, there were 2 terror attacks against the Jewish community. In the 17th of March, 1992, a terror attack against the Israeli embassy in Argentina where 22 people were killed and 240 were injured. And in July, the 18th of July, 1994, against the AMIA building, that is like a umbrella federation, sorry, for all the Jewish institutions in the country. It's the most important institution, a Jewish institution in the country. 85 people were killed and more than 300 people were injured. This was the Israeli embassy in 1992, before the attack. This was the building after the attack. A van drove into the building and exploded, killing these 22 people. This is a memorial. The same place where the embassy used to be was left as a memorial. You can see here the silhouette of the old building, and there are 22 trees planted in to remember the victims. This is the Israeli embassy square in memory of the victims. This was the building that was attacked in 1994, the AMIA building. AMIA building is the Mutual Aid Israelite Argentinian Association. It started as a burial institution in 1894, and now it's the most important Jewish institution. This was the building, and this is the building after the attack. This was in the Once district, that is the commercial Jewish district. It's a busy area, and so 85 people died. Neighbors, passers-by, a lot of people inside the building. In the first case, the embassy was moved to another building, and the plot was left as a memorial. In the case of Amia, it was rebuilt in the same place because they wanted to show that they could go on doing the same thing in the same place, and that they were not afraid. And so in 5 years after the attack in 1999, another building was built in the same location. You can see here the first names of all the victims. Here there is a sign that says, "To remember the pain that never stops." And between the wall and the building, there is a monument made, a sculpture made by Yaakov Agam, the Israeli kinetic sculptor. The base is a Magen David, and it depends on where you are standing. You can see different things, but in this side, you can see it's like a menorah with lit candles and the Star of David. So this is inside the Amia building. And every 18th of July, every year, they close all the streets around the building. They put a stage in the front of the building, and thousands of people go there with the image, with the picture of one of the victims, to claim for justice and to remember the victims. If you are wondering what happened with the terrorists, and there's no one in jail for either attack. There are 6 suspects, Iranian people, who Interpol is looking for, and Argentinian justice too, but Iran never accepted to extradite them. So 20 years after the attack, our then president, Christina Kirchner, in 2014, signed a memorandum of understanding between Argentina and Iran for a joint investigation of the Amia bombing. These are the foreign ministers. This is the Iranian and this is the Argentinian, who, by the way, was a Jew. The Jewish community, most of the Jewish community, was against that memorandum of understanding. She said, the president, that she wanted advances in the case and that Iran never accepted to extradite the suspects, so she needed to interrogate the suspects. Here in Argentina, there's no trial in absentia, so you need to interrogate the suspects. So she said, I'm going to send the prosecutor of the case to Iran to interrogate the suspects there. The prosecutor was Alberto Nisman. He was a Jew. He had a fatwa against himself, delivered by Iran. And so he said, I'm not going to Iran. It's very dangerous. And even if I go, I'm going to ask them to interrogate them. They are going to tell me it was not me. I don't remember, after 20 years. And after interrogating the suspects, there's nothing else we can do. So we will be forced to close the case. So he accused the president, Christina Kirchner, for trying to close the case. He said that she doesn't want advances in the case. She wants to close the case. And she made the accusation against the president in many TV programs, in newspapers, everywhere. And so the Congress asked him to go there and make the formal accusation against the president in the Congress. He had an appointment there in January 2015 on a Monday. The day before, a Sunday, he appeared dead in his apartment. At the beginning, they said that he had committed suicide, and they closed the case. At the end of that year, 2015, there were elections. We changed the government. A new party took over. The new president said, I want to investigate again. There was a new autopsy, and they said, the technicians, the experts, that he was killed. We don't know who killed him. But anyway, it doesn't matter what the experts say. People who supported the former president still say that he committed suicide. And other people say that he was killed. If you want to know more about this, there is a documentary made by the BBC. It's on Netflix. Nisman, the prosecutor, the president, and the spy. And they interview people who believe opposite ideas, and you can draw your own conclusion. So I told you that the first synagogue was the one I showed you, the Libertad Synagogue. So that area at the beginning was the Jewish district, because it was the only synagogue and the Jews had to walk to the synagogue. But then that area became very expensive because the courthouse was built there in 1940. And so the Jews started to move to another area that is called Once. It's a commercial area, but they started living above the stores or behind the stores until they became a little wealthier and they started moving to other nicer residential areas. The Once district is still full of stores owned by Jews, but not many Jews live there anymore. Only very Orthodox Jews who want to live close to their synagogue. But there are synagogues all over the city. So you can see here one of the stores. This is a store and the mezuzah, you see? And here in Once, Once means 11. It has nothing to do with the Jewish community. It's a date in Argentinian history. In this area, you can see the fusion between both cultures, Argentinian and Jewish. And this is why they sell mates, the container for the herb, mates and schmates. And this is the typical site, the typical landscape that you see in Once every day. It's not a nice area to live. They sell mainly wholesale. And so it's always very busy, full of traffic and people. People come from other provinces or from other cities to buy for their stores. I showed you also the first synagogue in Buenos Aires, the Libertad Synagogue, but there are many more. There are 80 synagogues in Buenos Aires, 80. These are some examples. Synagogue for Moroccan Jews, the one built by Polish Jews, also in 1932. And these are two synagogues for Syrian Jews. The upper one is Syrian Jews that came from Aleppo, and the bottom one, the Syrian Jews who came from Damascus. As my grandmother used to say, 2 Jews, 3 synagogues. Only, one country, 2 synagogues in different districts. And this is another one that is a very modern one in a wealthy district called Belgrano. This is a Reform synagogue, Amihai, but there are many, many more. Old ones, new ones, in rooms, Chabad Lubavitch, Reform, Reconstructionist, Orthodox, conservative, whatever you want. So here in Argentina, you can really choose the kind of Jew you want to be because there are many, many options, the same as in the US. We also have a replica of Anne Frank's house in Buenos Aires, and a Holocaust museum, and the only rabbinical seminary in Latin America that is, of course, called Marshall Mayer, for that rabbi that I told you before. It's the only one in Latin America, a Reform conservative seminary. Another thing that I want to tell you about the Jews, the relationship with the Jewish community with the other communities, you know that Pope Francis is Argentinian, and before he was appointed in 2013 as the Pope, he was the Archbishop of Buenos Aires. While he was the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he had a TV show with a rabbi who was called Abraham Skorka. He was the rabbi who officiated my wedding, so I know him. And they together had a TV show with talks on theology and philosophy. Both of them are very interesting people, and they are friends. And they wrote a book together that is called On Heaven and Earth. Of course, the only one that he is on the cover is the Pope, but at least they left the name of the rabbi on the cover of the book. And it's true that Pope Francis had, while he was the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he had very good relationship with all the other communities. Another thing that is very important for many Orthodox people who come to Argentina as tourists or people who live here is that we have the only kosher McDonald's outside Israel in the world. It's in a shopping mall here in Buenos Aires. The owner of the shopping mall is an Orthodox Jew, so he decided to open a kosher McDonald's there in the same floor of the regular McDonald's. So it's very funny when people go there and ask for a milkshake or a cheeseburger. They don't know the difference and they have to send them to the other one. But it's the only one outside Israel. And here in Argentina, mainly in Buenos Aires, where most of the Jews live, there are many schools, many synagogues, camps for children. They play sports, soccer, hockey, rugby, volleyball, tennis. There are clubs, social and sports clubs, many Jewish social and sports clubs in Buenos Aires. In Buenos Aires, also country clubs. There is a yacht club, golf clubs. There are many home for elderly in the city and in other provinces, in Buenos Aires, in Argentina. And these are some figures that are interesting for you to know. The 85% of Argentinian Jews live in Buenos Aires. There are 80 Jewish institutions in Buenos Aires, 80 more in the rest of the country, 40 Jewish schools in the country, that 24 are in Buenos Aires and 16 in other capital cities of other provinces, and 20,000 students attend the Jewish school network. 10,000 of them to Ord schools. We have 2 Ord schools that started as technical schools and now are schools that are more than technical schools, very important schools in 2 districts here in Buenos Aires. And there are a lot of students that go there that are not Jewish because they are very good schools. And so their parents send them there, although they have to study Jewish history and Hebrew. But anyway, so the Jewish community has made and continues to make considerable contributions to Argentine culture in science, art, music, humor, theater, sports, education, literature, politics, media, show business. The most prominent of the Jewish Argentinian that I know as an example of all this is one of our country's 5 Nobel. There are 5 Nobel prize winners here in Argentina. One of them, the last one, is Cesar Milstein, who died in 2002, and he got the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1984. But well, he's the most important one. But there are many Jewish people who contribute to Argentinian society and business and education, and as I told you before. Okay, I think I said a lot, so maybe we can stop here and you can ask questions, Jeff, if you're willing.
Yeah, I'm here. Claudia, hi. All right.
Okay. Shall I stop sharing?
I think you should stop sharing.
Okay, great.
We need like a big finale. That's I guess a Nobel Prize. That's a pretty good finale.
Yes, right, yes. This is why I left him for the end. Right. Yes.
So all right. So we're gonna do a question and answer in a minute. So if people have questions for Claudia, you can of course post them into the Q&A window within Zoom. Before we do that, we'll take a quick commercial break. Or in this case, what that means is me just reminding people that we do have this incredible trip coming up to Argentina. So let me just pull it up on the screen for a second here. And I just want to say, the first thing I say when I start these programs, I said at the beginning of this one, since 1986, Ayala Tours has been connecting people to Israel and the Jewish world. That's just kind of the thing that we always say. The key word there is connection. And how do we connect? Well, in this case, we're connecting virtually. You just gave us this absolutely beautiful overview of Argentinian Jewish history. You took us through 500 years of history very quickly. I'm very impressed, by the way, that you were able to do that very quickly. So, of course, that's virtual connection. Even better than that, one step higher than that is real connection, personal connection in real life. And the trips that we put together are an opportunity not just to go and see place, but to connect with people. So we have this trip coming up with the American Conference of Cantors. It will be an incredible experience. It's February, as it says there, February 15th through 24 next year. If you are not already signed up for it, we have over 100 people already signed up to travel on that particular trip. So if you haven't already signed up for it, I encourage you to go and take a look at the details, because beyond just what you might call a standard trip to Argentina, where you go and you see sites, it's going to have opportunities to meet with the local communities. It's going to have opportunities for Tikkun Olam, for social action, to give back. It's going to have opportunities, of course, for music. We're going to be traveling with about 24 cantors with incredible voices. So there's going to be these musical programs that are going to be incorporated into the tour. So if you haven't yet done it, there's your plug. Take a look, find all the information on our website. If you have any questions, of course, contact our office and we can answer your questions about this trip. By the way, in addition to the main tour, there's also extension options to Patagonia. If you want to go over to Montevideo, just across the river in Uruguay, that's one of the other options. It's really going to be something spectacular. So hope you'll consider that. Okay, that's the plug. Now we'll get to the question and answer. We've already got lots of questions coming in. I see, first of all, a nice comment from Karen Flem, who says, this is such a wonderful program. I have relatives in Buenos Aires due to the pogrom. Interesting. I can't wait to visit. So thank you to Karen for sharing that. The next one, I love it because Claudia, you and I were talking before, and I said probably people are going to ask about your president. Corey Schwartz writes in one word, Milei. Milei?
Yes. Well, Milei is he's an economist. I hope he can fix our economy and leave. The problem with Milei is that he is talking a lot about becoming a Jew or being Jewish, or and we don't need so much. We don't need him to say so much about the Jewish community, to show so much his appreciation of the Jewish community. Nobody cares what religion the president is, or and the problem with Milei is that even if he fixes our economy, he's never going to be liked by the people. He's not a likable person. So, and if people relate him to the Jews, is not a good idea. So that is the problem. Some people are happy because they say, well, he supports Israel and everything, but I hope he would, stay silent, at least for a while.
But it does seem like so far so good, right? Better than everybody was expecting before he came in.
Well, now there are a lot of people who are having a hard time. So, to fix the economy, you have to do some things that are not popular. But I hope that there are not going to be a lot of people left, behind. There are a lot of people, that are suffering, but maybe it's going to be better.
All right. So, okay. Ellen Stern writes in, a delightful, knowledgeable lecture. Thank you so much. I really learned a lot. Thank you, Ellen, for writing that. And Alan Lisowitz would like to know, if you could speak about anti-Semitism in Argentina now. Is there anti-Semitism there now? And if so, he says how bad, but does it impact your day-to-day life?
Well, this is something that many people ask me. Just for you to know, I'm 60. I spent my life in I went to Jewish schools, but also to public institutions and public university, and never had a problem for being a Jew. This started changing since the Intifada, since that time, it started changing a little. But after October 7th, as everywhere else, it changed a lot. We are not having the problems you are experimenting in the United States, in Canada, in Europe. We are not having those problems. We are not experiencing violence against the Jews here in Argentina. But there are some people who feel that they have that they can say whatever they want against the Jews or against Israel that before they wouldn't. Let me give me one example. October 7th took place. October 8th, we had a debate among 5 candidates for the presidency, because last year we had elections. And so it was the day after the October 7th. 5 candidates. Only one of them was Jewish, a woman from the left-wing party. The 4 other candidates accepted to have a minute of silence for the victims and to condemn Hamas for the attack. The only one who didn't want to was the Jewish woman. So it's incredible, but this is what happens. It's the left-wing parties here in Argentina are against Israel, and they are talking and they are saying it aloud, and it doesn't matter if they are Jewish or non-Jewish, they are against Israel, and they are accepting what Hamas did, or even not believing about the rapes and everything else. Anyway, we didn't have many demonstrations. We didn't have violent demonstrations, only some in front of the Israeli embassy, but not violent. And most of the demonstrations are to claim for the release of the hostages so far.
So, okay, a few other questions. Sheldon Wolf would like to know Argentina's official position regarding the Israel-Hamas conflict. I mean, I think Milei has been pretty clearly pro-Israel, but yeah.
Yes, pro-Israel completely. Not all the other parties, but the government, the Argentinian state now, the government is pro-Israel. The previous one was not.
Yeah. So let me ask you, of course, we're all living through a difficult time as a Jewish community worldwide. In Argentina, is there a period of time that you would say you would consider to be kind of the golden age of Jewish life in Argentinian history?
I would say maybe before, you said the 30s. The 30s was the time when all these people came from the colonies and started living here, and they felt safe and free when they built the synagogue. It was that time. And now, although you can see the synagogues and you know where they are, there are barricades in front of all the synagogues and all the Jewish buildings, and also American buildings that are very controversial, because some people say that we are marking the Jewish buildings that way, but other people say, well, terrorists know where they are, at least we are preventing another attack. But I think that maybe the 30s was the golden age, not only for Jews, for Argentina.
Yeah, it's a worldwide issue right now. Okay, I've had several people write in just asking in terms of a recording. We'll let people know afterwards. There'll be an email that goes out just so that people get information about that, because they did enjoy this program. Virginia Levin writes in and says, Rabbi Skorka, was a member of my synagogue in Wynwood, Pennsylvania before he moved. So that's a nice connection there.
Yeah.
We also have an anonymous attendee who wrote in that writes, I believe my grandfather was born in Moisesville. Is it difficult to travel and tour there?
No, it's not. It's 5 hours. You have to from Buenos Aires, so you have to travel there. But yes, there are tours to Mosesville. Mosesville is in the Santa Fe province, and there are many other colonies in Entre Rios. So if you want to see the colonies, to go to visit the colonies, you have to go to 2 different provinces. But if you if you want to go only to Mosesville, it's 500 kilometers, 5 hours more or less. And yes, you can go there, no problem.
Just hop, skip, and a jump. Okay, we already ran a little over on time, but we had one other question, and then we'll start to wrap up here. Anonymous attendee wanted to know if you knew the name of the Argentinian man who had signed the memorandum with Iran.
Yes. Yeah. He was Héctor Timerman. Héctor Timerman was the son. He was a foreign minister, and he was the son of Jacobo Timerman, who during the dictatorship, he was a journalist. During the dictatorship, he went to Israel, and he was protected in Israel because he was in danger here. And when he was in Israel, after some time, he started criticizing Israel a lot. And so some people didn't like him. He died many years ago, but also Héctor Timerman, his son, who was the one who signed the agreement, also died a few years ago.
All right, Claudia, I think we will wrap up. I just want to thank you deeply for such an illuminating presentation.
Thank you.
I thank you. The stories you told were excellent. And of course, if I'm left with nothing else, I've got mates and schmatas.
Yes.
I'll take that with me. I like that a lot.
Yes.
And for everybody out there, I hope you enjoyed it. Of course, we hope to see you in Buenos Aires in Argentina this February on the American Conference of Cantors trip. Information's on our website. You can call our office for more information. And one final question for you before we go. Is there a question that you always wish people would ask you on programs like this, but they never get around to asking you?
Maybe about my family.
No. So tell us about your family.
No. Yes. You know, it's I was joking, but it's interesting. The Jewish community of Argentina, that is a question. Is it shrinking or is it growing? I told you that there was assimilation and also immigration waves. Lately, it was shrinking. But now there are a lot, this is something that is happening now. There are a lot of young couples who are becoming Orthodox, Chabad Lubavitch, couples who were raised in non-religious families. So it's very surprising. And they are becoming Orthodox and having a lot of children. So maybe the Jewish community is not going to shrink so much, but maybe it's going to grow in the following 5 or 10 years. We'll know. But this is something that is happening now, and it's very surprising. Another thing that I didn't tell you, I told you before, that is another funny thing, is that I live in the district of Villa Crespo. That is a Jewish district for non-religious Jews. And as there are so many Jews living in Villa Crespo, people call it Villa Kreplach.
And that's a perfect place for us to end.
You see?
Villa Kreplach. Claudia, thank you so much. Wish everybody well out there. And of course, as I said, contact our office if you have any questions about the upcoming trip. All the best to you. And I hope we'll see you on a future program or in person down in Buenos Aires.
Thank you. So thank you for having me. Bye.
Absolutely.
Bye, everyone.